Golden Bluetooth here with you again, and today I want to talk about which conference I think has the biggest chance of missing the college football playoffs. So, first of all, we're going to talk with the SEC about the SEC. They're not going to miss it. Number one, college football loves the SEC way too much. On top of that, they have way too many contenders. Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Florida, and Georgia are at the top of the list. One or maybe even two of those teams will make the playoffs. In the ACC, we have Clemson. Yeah, Clemson's pretty much the ACC's only chance, but usually they have no problem with their schedule, and even if they do have one loss, the committee usually overlooks it. Then we look at the Big Ten, and I see Michigan. I know, Jim Harbaugh, he hasn't turned out to be a great coach, but you still can't totally count out Michigan at the beginning of the season. So I'll say Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and even Wisconsin. Sometimes they can be sneaky. So I'm going to say the SEC, ACC, and Big Ten get at least one team in. So that leaves us with the Pac-12 and the Big 12. So first I want to talk about the Big 12. I think the Big 12 has two contenders. They have Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Now, Oklahoma, they've been pretty much owning the Big 12 over the past few years. But this year, Oklahoma State's really loaded. They have Chuba Hubbard. They have a dynamic quarterback, running back, and wide receiver combo. Probably the best in the nation, or possibly could be the best in the nation. So I look to see that I think Oklahoma State will give Oklahoma a run for their money. So we will see how that turns out. So that's the Big 12. Then we move on to the Pac-12. Really, the only team that I see that could come out of the Pac-12 is Oregon. So I want to look at their schedule real quick. So their first game is North Dakota State at home. Might be tricky. I think that's a win. Next game, Ohio State at home. That's a 50-50, so I'll give them a half. Next, Hawaii at home, win. Next, at Colorado, I'll say win. Next, versus Washington, I'll say 50-50 on that one too, so that's one loss. At Cal, I'll give them a win. Versus Stanford, versus Arizona, I think both of those are win. USC at home, I'll give them a win. Arizona State at home, I'll give them a win. And then they have to go to Washington State. That could be a little tricky, so that's 50-50. And then at Oregon State, I think that's a win. So Oregon could end up with one or two losses, so it would come down to strength of schedule and where Oklahoma and Oklahoma State finish at the end of the season. So I'm going to say, I'm sorry to say this, the conference that's going to be left out in this year's playoff is going to be the Pac-12. Only because they only have Oregon to give them a chance. And I just think that's too much pressure on Oregon. There's too many chances for slip-ups. Their schedule isn't terrible, but starting off in the second game versus Ohio State, that's rough. But if they were to beat Ohio State, that would immediately catapult them into playoff conversation. So if their season hinges on one game. The Pac-12's hopes hinges on one game. Ohio State at Oregon on September 12th. That's the game to look for. That will be the game of the year. That will determine a lot of things. That's all I got for you today. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you next show.